All right, welcome to Books and Whatever Else. And tonight our special guest is Eric Butler.
Hey,
Thank you for coming on the show.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was like, yay. He said yes. I got excited. Fangirl a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit.
No, I was gonna say, of course I'd say yes. Yeah, I enjoyed talks at scares, and so I thought this would be a fun thing to do.
Definitely, definitely. So how was your day so far? Or it is
So
Monday.
far it's been okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good, good.
Yours?
It's been pretty good. It's been relaxing. I was supposed to write today, but I kind of didn't do nothing.
Yeah,
Watched some
sometimes those
True
are
Blood.
nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. I've been working on some projects and then I usually do more at night. So, but I do try and get some stuff done during the day.
I
Man,
normally I'll write a lot and then I'll stop for like 2 weeks and then I'll just like go back to writing nonstop for a couple more weeks.
yeah, I need to take a break like that, but I've got a couple things that I promised to get done, so I'm trying to get them done in time. So.
I
I got a
totally
couple
get that.
deadlines coming up. So
So let's talk about what first got you into writing. Was it something you've always did or
yeah, I started writing when I was very young. My mom was big into putting me into classes in the summer and stuff. And so I did a lot of artsy fartsy things,
mm-hmm.
like acting camps and production stuff and writing and things like anything that she could find that would keep me occupied, play golf and things like that. So I always did it when I was younger, and I always found it as a fun outlet to be creative. So
Mm-hmm.
now I never once thought about doing anything with it. It was always just something I did. I wrote through high school and wrote a lot in college, but I didn't have a very good guidance counselor. So they never once mentioned maybe doing that for a living. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so then it was years later that I started publishing. So
So what made you like just do the extra like you know what I'm just going to publish this book.
it's funny as my wife, kind of. She was always on my case about not writing a book. You should always write a book. You should write a book. And she's not a big fan of horror, so she would never read it. But she's always like, yo, you have the talent. You should write this. And life was just always in the way. So one year I got an idea in October, and I decided that for Christmas I would give her a completed novel. And luckily I had something that I'd already written, 20,000 words with. So it wasn't as difficult. I don't think I would have been able to hammer it out in 2 months, but I was able to fix what I had written. And, uh, and then Christmas Eve, I was actually typing the last bit and hitting print so I could have it in a box for Christmas morning. So, and that was
That
the
would have
first
made me
novel I put
cry.
out. The first novel I put out was The Shadow Within. That's this not this is what this was. What's funny though is I gave it to her and it took 2 more years before it was ready for it to actually be published. So
So, but it was worth it in the end. That's one I haven't read yet.
yeah, no, it was a funny thing because it was like I said, it wasn't anything that she would enjoy. And she's only read that and Sins of the Past. And the Sins of the Past I wrote so she would read it. Because I call that my PG-13 book. And it's more fantastical. It's got more elements of mystery and adventure than the other ones. But she read the first idea of what Shadow became, and then it took 2 years for me to get in there and hammer the rest of it out. So, but yeah, no, it's my love letter to layman, is what I always say.
Oh, that was,
When I read Layman, I realized how far we could go or what we could do, or the fact
mm-hmm.
that we didn't always have to have a story that made sense in a way, or that it could be
Mm-hmm.
about. It's basically Seinfeld. He's like the Seinfeld of horror. He can
Yeah.
take a very mundane thing and give you 400 pages of this amazing story of all these
Mm-hmm.
horrible things happening. So, Shadow Within is kind of my tip to the cap, and say thank you to Layman for opening that avenue of horror to me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what is maybe one of your favorite books of yours that you wrote, or maybe something you had the most fun doing that was just
Um,
easy and just flowed?
yeah, probably Public is probably the one that it was the easiest. When I finished
15.
Shadow Within, like I said, it was 2 more years before I published it. And the funny thing is, so my son has Crohn's, and so near the end of high school for him, he got really bad. And so I ended up quitting my job and just staying home and taking care of him, helping him get through high school so he could graduate and, doctor visits and all that stuff. And then in my downtime is when I was working on cleaning up Shadow and figuring out how to format and all that nonsense and the covers and all that stuff. And December of 2019, I released Shadow, and I had no idea about books of horror. I didn't know any of the other groups existed. I didn't know what to do with it. I just released it on Amazon, and then I was like, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do next? So all I thought was, I'll just write another book, and that's Public Massacre. And I just sat down and hammered that out. My mom's from the area, she's a couple hours from Louisville. And so I knew about their version of the Goat Man, and it's
Mhm.
much better than the Texas Goat Man. So I kind of leaned into it, made it my own, and it was a fun um, ride just getting that one written. And I had that one written and formatted and produced on Amazon, I think late April, early May, right? So it was less than a half a year, and I was already on the second book was out. So,
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. What's your most popular book, or do you think is your most popular book?
Public Massacre is my most popular
Hopefully.
book. Yeah, Rest Stop, but it's not really a book; it's a short. So, yep.
I got
And
my
so,
shirt on.
yeah, and I love that. I love the story, and I love the idea that came from that and all that. But I would say Public's probably I I'm lucky that I get a lot of positive from all the books when people read them,
Mhm.
so that's always cool. But I think most people gravitate towards Public, especially when they find out it's about the Goat Man. Some people
Yeah.
think it's about a satanic cult, so um, then they find out that it's a cryptid. But if I'm telling people, almost everybody wants the Public. So
Yeah. So what would be maybe from an indie author and maybe a bigger author, some of your favorite books that also could have inspired you?
well, the stuff that I like to read when I was younger, a lot of it's not horror. I read a lot of Poe when I was a kid. So that is, but then I also read, Robert Jordan's one of my favorite writers, Wheel of Time.
I mean, that's my
And
favorite fantasy series.
oh yeah, I
My
read it all.
favorite.
I read it's fact instead of reading news series, I just reread that over and
Mhm.
over again. So
Mhm.
um and I love him. I love his style of writing, and a lot of what I do is in that vein. So is where I get my layman twists and turns and the my
Mhm.
horror voice from layman. I do feel like my writing voice leans more towards Jordan. And so, and his Conan stuff's really good, and I just
Yes.
enjoyed everything he did. So,
Mhm.
I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes stuff, and I like things set in that period of time. So, you know, there's quite a few books where Sherlock Holmes meets up with like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, stuff like that. I really enjoyed those, and I think those influenced me, especially like Sins of the Past is basically Sherlock Holmes kind of doing that kind of stuff. But let's see, I'm trying to think. If we're
I love
talking
fantasy too. Have you read Mistborn?
You know what? I have not. I'm not a huge Sanderson guy, but I did appreciate what he did picking up and finishing
Hmm.
Jordan's,
Yeah.
vision. Um I like the idea of Mistborn, but I
Mhm.
haven't I haven't jumped into it. It's one of those weird things where I was all fantasy when I was younger.
Mhm.
When you read horror and stuff, but I was really fantasy. I read all the Dragonlance, I loved all the Forgotten Realms and everything that they
Yeah.
did. I loved all that, and I loved all the stuff that branched off of that from the writers. That they did their own series and all that stuff. But when I got into college, I stopped reading fantasy as much. I've read some of the Games of Thrones, and I just reread Jordan stuff. But I haven't found anything that's really grabbed my attention really since my early 20s. Um,
I do like the romanticy fantasy stuff. I
mhm.
really like Throne of Glass. I thought that was amazing, but I haven't really found any fantasy books lately that have like just hooked me in and been like I need to read everything from this author. It's been a while. It's been
Yeah,
most for me too.
I did read something 10 years ago that was a like a indie fantasy guy, and I got it for my son's godfather because he likes fantasy, and so I got a copy too, and I read it. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was decent. But it was so in depth and so intricate, and he didn't have any of the parts out. So I don't even know if he's finished the series. So I'll have to go and look that up. But like I said, I haven't really focused too much. If I have any free time and I'm not reading horror, I will read Sherlock Holmes stuff, or I'll read C.S. Harris has a great series out that's
Hmm,
early
second, I
1900s.
need to give it some
Get some
drink.
water. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down. I was like, oh my God, I'm choking. Jesus,
You okay?
I'm fine now.
Um, C.S. Harris, she does a series based in the late 1900s that's about a viscount that decides that he doesn't want to just be a rich kid, so he starts solving crime, mysteries and murders and stuff, and it ruffles the feathers. There's a lot of political intrigue, but then there's also just a simple mystery. Every book's a mystery. That one's a fun one to read. She puts something out every year. Um, if I'm gonna go with horror though, it's Richard Lehman. First one I read from him was Darkness Tells Us.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's the one that it's just so wild. And that's the one that kind of opened my eyes to everything. Right after that, I started reading Brian Keene, like The Rising, Dead Sea. Those
I've
are
got
both.
the seller that I need to read that Judith sent me.
That's the funniest thing too, because as a layman fan, I don't like The Cellar. I don't like The Beast
Really?
House. It's not bad. It's just not my cup of tea. I mean,
Mhm.
I read it and I thought, oh, it's fine. It is very extreme. It's got a lot of, especially when you think about it, it was written in the early 80s.
Mhm.
Um, he may have even written in the late 70s, but going into the 80s when they published it, it does have a lot of things that probably were very shocking at the time that seem a little more commonplace now. Um, but I'm just not a huge fan of the Beast House series. But it's still great because it's Richard Lehman. So
What
the
would be
only
the number one
my
of his?
number one Lehman, um, I'll tell you, the one that I love, the one I talk the most about is probably Night in the Lonesome October.
Mhm.
Hopefully I didn't get the title wrong. It's got one of those weird titles that you can always screw up. Um, and it's another one of those one where he wrote and he's like, it's a book about nothing, but it's, entertaining. It focuses on all these different weird things happening. It's just about a guy who breaks up with his girlfriend and he's just wandering the streets at night and he comes across this girl that walks into houses. So he
Mhm.
finds her initially and he's just interested in her and he follows her and he's kind of creepy about it. And then he realizes that she keeps wandering into people's houses and they kind of meet up and they start doing all this weird stuff. And and
That
then
does
there's
sound really.
there's yeah, it's just really odd. All the weird characters that Layman does well pop in and out, and kind of antagonize the main character. And it's just a fun read. And it's one of those things where you can really say, okay, this is a book about nothing. It's really about nothing. Just about a kid who's he's a writer, he's going to college, he's in a college town, and it's just like, watching him for a couple weeks and seeing all the nonsense he gets into.
I'm definitely
But
going
like I
to check
said,
it out.
um, Blood Games, I want to say is a really good one. It's four women that come together every year and they go on vacation and they pick this weird haunted place to go visit and it's in the middle of the woods and stuff. And that's a pretty fun one. Endless Night is really good. It's in two perspectives. You get the killer. Um, I want to say he's in first person, or he might actually, it might be third person for the killer and first person for the victim. And so you get both of their, what's going on.
I love
And
stuff
that's
like
an
that.
interesting, yeah, it's a very interesting read, just the way he wrote it. But then to
Hmm.
get both perspectives that way, and one of them being first person, you really get into the story, drags you into it. Island's really funny. Um, it's hard for me to the only thing for him, I love pretty much everything. The only one I don't like, and that I always tell people don't read it, is The Lake. Don't read The Lake until you've read 10, 15 Layman's. and then read The Lake, and then you'll
Mhm.
understand why he waited, because it was one that he had in a drawer when he died. And I don't think that he was far enough into it to make it a layman. So whoever cleaned it up and they put it out under his name, it's not. It doesn't read like a layman at all. It doesn't have the same taste to it.
Yeah.
It's missing that vibe you need. So I always
Mhm.
say the lake. If you start with the lake, you might enjoy it, but it's not a good layman book. So
Yeah.
um, and he had a couple like that, but the other ones I think were farther along when they put them out. So Come Out Tonight's a good one. That's another one where you wouldn't think it would work, and he somehow gets 400 pages out of it. So uh, about somebody that think two people are about to hook up. He needs a condom, so he goes to the store and he never comes back. And the girl finally goes out to go look for him, and all this stuff happens. So
I like
one
stuff
that
like
nobody yeah, and that's a fun idea, right? If you sat down and said,
that.
okay, I'm just going to write this. Here's this one sentence idea. How do I make this into something? And then you kind of go with it, you know. And it's fun to watch Layman work,
Mhm.
um, just to see where his mind takes him on these things. I'm not a huge vampire fan, but he's got the most unique vampire books, Bite and Stake, and the Traveling
Oh,
Vampire
I
Show.
love Bite.
Yeah, all
I
three of those are
love.
so interesting and different, and they give you a twist on the vampire mythos that you didn't know you
Mhm.
needed, and they're just unique. I just love those. One Rainy Night's really great. It's one that I don't think enough people talk about, where the rain basically possesses the people and turns them into these evil things. It's like this dark black rain that comes down and it like seeps into their souls and turns and kind of it like awakens everyone's most evil thoughts and behaviors. And this whole town, of course,
I
is caught
really
in it.
love that concept.
Yeah, it's just fun stuff he does like that. And
Yeah.
it's cool because you can see he's done a mummy book, he's got a Frankenstein book, he's got the vampire books, so he does some of those too. But yeah, he's my guy. He's the one I always will
Always go
champion.
to.
Yeah.
So what's something you could talk about that you got upcoming that you're excited about?
Well, let me grab it right here. We just released this Bringers of Hell, and this is with Patrick C. Harrison the third, Chris Miller, MikeEnnenbach, and myself. Each one of us took a different horseman from the apocalypse, and we kind of gave what we thought of that specific horseman. I got pestilence, so I start off the book, and then we go to war with Chris Miller, famine with Patrick, and Mike took over death, and he's brilliant with that. I thought all four stories are really good. They all managed to showcase each style that we have, each one of our
Mhm.
styles, but also gives a unique and fun take that I don't think the other ones would have thought of. So
Mhm.
we all have our own stamp on the book, and it just came out, so that's a fun thing. I can't wait to get that into people's hands at the events and stuff. The first one we're
So
going
it's
to do is
out
Texas
now.
AuthorCon. Yeah, it's out now. You can order on Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited. So just came out, I want to say 6 days ago. Project I'm working on, I am got a couple trying to finish a story for an anthology that I promised. It's a Christmas anthology, so hopefully that'll be out at Christmas. And then I'm working on a third Poplick and another Don Texas.
Oh wow.
And I've got a standalone holiday story I'm working on that I'm shooting for November. It's set in the snow and all that stuff. So it's a nice cold weather book, which I don't think I've done yet. So
Yeah, I love seasonal books and stuff. I'm obsessed with anything Halloween or any kind of stories about Halloween or anything coming out close to Halloween.
yeah, I'd like to do some stuff too with that. I've got a couple ideas for collections where kind of like Trick or Treat, where you have one main thing going through a whole bunch of different
Mhm.
stories. Kind of would like to do that. I have if there was more time in the day, I'd give you 10 more things I'm working on because I've got a whole bunch of different things at different levels. But if I'm lucky, before the end of the year, I'll have another Poplick and another Don Texas.
I'm excited for another public.
Yeah, I
Yes.
really enjoyed the character. I love going back to the monster. I think he's fun and unique, and I think it's
Mhm.
I do I enjoy reading a good creature feature, but I like writing them too. They're fun.
Yeah, I love all the creature features. I grew up reading like creature comics and
Mhm.
eerie comics and stuff like that. That's what started my whole like horror journey and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And I think a lot of us did, because you were able to get a hold of the comics even at a young age.
Hmm.
Most of that is never, um, you know, I don't want to say edited, but you know what I mean? The parents are always happy to hand you a comic. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
really what the content is, as long as it's not obvious on the cover that it's something.
Yep.
And so you get a taste of it early. Yeah, I enjoyed all those creepers and all that stuff.
Comics
House
right
of
here.
Mystery. Oh yeah, there you go. Old
Just
school.
comics just everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
I'm the same way. I've got a room that's filled with comics and stuff. My son took over it to have his computer and stuff. But it's filled with all my comics, and I used to work at a comic book store when I was younger, and so I've got a whole
Oh,
bunch of
that's cool.
nonsense.
So let's talk about any like weird quirks or other talents you might have.
Yeah, I try to think about this. Uh, I don't know what would be a weird quirk. Um,
Maybe some people like they don't like their food to touch or like
yeah, I know. I wish I had something. That's what I'm saying. I have a friend that their food has to be.
you're
We
just
have to
not
give
that
them
picky about any of that stuff.
right. Yeah, I try. I try and shrug at everything. Really, that's my motto. Is we just shrug.
So what about talents? What do you
Um,
besides
in the
writing?
old days, I would say writing, but um, yeah, my wife's idea of a talent is that I can almost always pick out actors from every movie and tell her where we've seen them before, or songs or things of that nature. But I just think that's probably has something to do with me having, ADHD or something that hasn't been diagnosed. So, but I am big on trivia and useless knowledge. And I
Yeah.
do pull up stuff. Like if we watch a movie, I can tell her like, "Oh, we saw this movie originally at that theater over off of this street in this town. We were with these people," that kind of stuff. And she doesn't even remember seeing the movie.
I mean,
I do
that is
stuff
kind
like
of a
that.
talent though.
Yeah, it feels more like I've got something mentally unbalanced and it just hasn't been diagnosed properly yet. But
See.
yeah, that's that kind of stuff. I'm big into football, so I know a lot about fantasy football and stuff like that. I play video games, but I don't know if I have a talent of anything. So
And you're a
I
great
get
dog dad from what I can see.
that is one thing. Yeah, I do have three huskies, and I do love letting them, run the household and doing what we can for them. But
And I seen that
um,
name Khaleesi. I was like, oh, Game of Thrones. And then you were like, meh, Game of Thrones.
yeah, I know. Well, that's funny because when we got her, she's actually Kittle's our second husky, Kittle. Um, she's related to Totoro because they both have the same dad. But her mom is Khaleesi, and the breeder decided to retire, and she reached out and asked if we would take Khaleesi in. So
Oh.
I did. So we didn't name her. So I didn't. Even, I had Rain Havoc had to tell me what the name was.
Mhm.
So I had no clue. When I told Rain that we were getting this new dog, and I gave her the name, she started explaining it to me, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it.
The mother of dragons, the breaker of chains.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny because I could see Kittle's kind of a dragon.
Mhm.
So I can see that easily. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. Huskies are kind of like you get one, you got to have all of them. I guess it's Pokemon or something we're collecting.
You
So hopefully
got like
we're
a
at
sled
three.
dog team.
Yeah, I know, right? Then that would be fun to get them all going. But it's so hot here in Texas that we'd only have a month or two where we could do anything with it. So
And they're very mouthy, right?
oh yeah, all the time. Well, what's funny is Calissie's quiet as a mouse. She'll whine a little bit when she wants attention, but she never. I've only heard her howl once, and it took a lot to get that. And the other Kittle and Totoro are the talkative ones. So yeah, you should hear it when I should film it one time when we go to feed them because it's very loud at that moment. So
Oh my God. So you're going to be at um, TBR, Tennessee Con.
mhm.
You're going to be at Scares.
In St. Louis, yeah.
And what other ones are you going to be
At the end of July, we'll be at Texas AuthorCon in Richardson, and that's a pretty big one in our area. And we have some people come. Candace Nola's going to be there, and Donna Latham's going to be there, and So we got a lot of people coming from out of town too, but it's not just horror. It's got a good mix of every genre. So, and this is the third year we've done Texas Author Con. I will go to Killer Con for a day in Austin. I'm gonna miss the day they do the awards, but I'll be there Friday to hang out with people and see them. So anybody that comes for the first day of the event, I'll see them, and that's in Austin.
Hmm.
And then I'm also going to be at Scares in Virginia the next year. I'll be at that one, and there'll probably be a couple more that I don't know about yet that'll fill in as I, find a spot here or there.
I'm excited for TBR. That'll be the first time I have a table somewhere.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think it's going to be a fun event. I like Megan's. Seems like she's got
She
it
is
in.
amazing.
Yeah,
I love her to death.
she's great, but I think she's got control of the event. That event seems like it's
Mhm.
going to be handled really well for a first time event. And such a large first time event. I think it's going to be pretty fun and cool. And I think there'll be other genres there too. And that's always fun because you kind of pull some of the people in that maybe would never even look at horror. And as they're walking around, they might stop by your table and then you can sell them on something and get them hooked on a new genre or at least give it a shot. A lot of people will shy away from horror because they think it's too much, but then once they read it, they can't get enough of it. I've noticed that
Mhm.
almost every time. So yeah, I'm
Yep.
really excited. The Knoxville TBR one is going to be a fun time.
Me too. Me too. Well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I
Okay.
appreciate you coming on. I was a little nervous today. I was like, oh, am I gonna be able to talk right? I get that way sometimes.
I thought it was great, and I've been sitting there all day trying to think of a special talent. I guess maybe that's it, procrastination. So
I still think a little bit of like knowing, people and stuff from movies is kind of neat. I like that because sometimes I'm like, who is this person? Where did I see them from? And it'll drive me crazy.
yeah, my wife totally doesn't care, but I always roll it out just in case. So
Well, thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back again next time.
yeah, for sure, anytime.
And I look forward to seeing you at TBR.
Me too.